we'll be reviewing Withnail I.
Withnail.
Yeah, that's what I said. Withnail I, right?
No, it's Withnail.
No. Believe me, it's Withnail I. That's the British cult film that we're discussing, the black comedy directed by Bruce Robinson. Withnail.
That's it, Dunning. I demand to have some booze.
That's right, another movie show from this channel, but this one's a little different. This one we're just going to be talking, myself and guests maybe, are just going to be talking about your favorite cult films. But tonight, I have a special guest, and this gentleman has been trying, I watch a lot of films. This man has been trying to get me to watch this particular film since we've met each other. Mr. Ted Rodney, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, John, I'm really happy to join you, and I'm even happier that you finally watched it. And, I feel like I can already sense that you're being sucked into the cult a little bit. I've noticed that with the exception of, you pronouncing Withnail like an American, that some of the language from the movie is already beginning to creep into your speech patterns, and that's what we normally see with this one.
To spend a carefree weekend in the English countryside. Bask in the warm sunshine.
We've gone on holiday by mistake.
Enjoy the rustic pleasure of country living.
It's gonna be so cold in here. Like Greenland in here. Wants to get down there and have sex with those cows.
Partake of fine varietal wine.
You're drunk.
I assure you I'm not, officer. I've only had a few ales.
Get in the back of the van!
Take lunch at a charming pub.
We want the finest wines available to humanity. We want them here, and we want them now.
Fraternize with cheery locals.
I don't care where you come from.
Hans!
Experience culinary pleasure.
So I can make it die.
There is, you will agree, certain je ne sais quoi about a firm young carrot.
Fish in the region's streams.
Don't threaten me with a dead fish.
Withnail I, a trip worth taking.
What absolute twaddle.
Let's just set the stage real quick. Withnail I is from 1987, directed by Bruce Robinson, stars Richard E. Grant, Richard Griffiths, and Paul McGann. And those are basically, there's a few more characters in there, like the great character of Danny, who was played by, I think his name's Ralph Brown. Yeah, Ralph Brown did Danny. Man, I did not recognize Ralph Brown while I was watching this film until after I was watching some kind of little featurette, and I'm like, that's the guy from Alien.
From Alien. Well, don't forget Airheads with Steve Buscemi and Brendan Fraser.
Sure. I mean, he completely transformed into this complete, spaced out, stoner in the guy on the couch, basically, who hasn't had one of those, right?
I sure have.
Before we get too much into it, I mean, we would be doing this 100% incorrectly if we didn't also invite some other special guests. And tonight I have Freem Beer. This is their dank IPA. I'm not going to partake, if you know what I mean, read between the lines on one of these podcasts. So I'm going to drink something that tastes like it's grown, if you are picking up what I'm putting down. Ted, do you have anything with you tonight?
I do. So Withnail I usually is a real drinking event at the Rep Theater here. And, as a younger man, I used to get caught with a trench coat and sneaking the drinks in. So usually you want to have more than one drink. I've got myself a little Bombay gin, and just to even it out with something a little easier, I've got a Stiegel Radler. So
those are good.
Beer Radler. And we'll see where it goes from there. I've got my mother-in-law's down in the kitchen, and I'm sure if I run myself dry, she'll trot down with something heavier, maybe some of the Crown Royal.
Maybe some lighter fluid. That might be what's in here. Who knows? If I need a emergency, get drunk quicker, I have one of those as well. So, yeah, Ted, what was it about? I mean, you are, if there ever was a Withnail and I connoisseur, you are the guy. This is your movie. What drew? Just tell me your history with this film. When did you see it for the first time? Who told you about it? And tell me why it's so important to you.
So I think I was around maybe 17 or 18, and I was still living with my parents, and I was quite a heavy drinker, and I stumbled home, one evening. My parents were already in bed. There was no one awake in the house, and I wasn't quite ready to let the festivities end, so I plopped myself in front of the TV with a freshly opened beer, my dad's, and the sort of pay-per-view movie channel, Withnail and I came on, and that's it. I started watching it, and the next day, I went and told all my buddies, "You guys, this film is amazing. We've got to watch it. We've got to ritualize it. We've got to drink," and it sort of became the young man's sort of bag of bad ideas that we carried around with us for quite some time, and it often played at the rep theaters here in Ottawa. So when that was the case, we would sneak in with our booze and get drunk in the theater as we watched it, and stumble out to bars afterwards. So it just became, a real aspect of my life. It's not just my favorite cult movie; it's my favorite movie, and is very, it reflects a lot of the way that I used to be, as far as being a heavy drinker and a heavy partier, and maybe less than 100% productive with my time. So I can still watch it, and it's very nostalgic for me. So
this, and it was a while before it's so bizarre that I did not know of this film before I met you, because I am such a huge fan of this style of film, of this British humor, starting with Monty Python, going to, like the Danny Boyle films, even though they're not strict comedies, but it felt very much like that, like a Trainspotting, or like even like an Edgar Wright, like Shaun of the Dead. I am all over those films. Speak to my soul. So the fact that this completely flew under the radar for me, and like you said, how autobiographical, I think everyone can relate to this, because many times in my life, I moved out when I was 16. So you can imagine the type of trouble I got into playing in a rock band and all this. I was very much the character of Withnail a lot of the time, and a lot more of the time, the character of Marwyn, because, Marwyn is that voice of reason. He's the one that kind of makes sure that the festivities happen, but people are still getting home intact, so to speak. And Withnail is just a complete, flamboyant, failed actor. But did he even try? Did he even try to fail? That's very ambiguous, right?
Withnail for me is like a representation of, like, he's the perfect id, right? Like for Withnail, it's all about him. It's all about his base animal desires, and Marwood is more like it's more like the ego or superego. He's reflective, at least. I mean, he clearly is going along for some of the adventures, and is drinking and drugging himself into a stupor. When the movie opens, I think they're coming off of a 72-hour speed binge. And that's the state where we find them. But he's somewhat responsible and somewhat looking to get out of it, whereas Withnail is content to just keep feeding the beast.
And I've only seen this film once, and that was last night. And I rewatched certain parts today. But like you said, this is one of the most quotable films I've ever seen. And they all like burn into your brain. Like we were saying, the character, the guy on the couch, Danny, Danny has, like, everything he says is a bumper sticker, right?
Don't get uptight with me, mate. Because if you do, I'll have to give you a dose of medicine. And if I spike you, you'll know you've been spoken to.
You wouldn't spike me. You're too mean. Besides, there's nothing invented I couldn't take.
If I medicined you, you'd think a brain tumour was a birthday present.
I could take double anything you could.
Very, very foolish words, mate.
Because he's that like mantra guy, super stoner, and we've all had one of those too. Yeah. Mine personal Danny, his name was. I'm gonna do some shout outs in this episode. Let me tell you, I had a guy named Travis McQueen. He's kind of like the guy on the couch that you would be very surprised to learn if he's even still alive to this day. You know, and I had even when I was more of the Morrowind. I want to say Morrowind, like the game, like the Elder Scrolls game.
Wood.
Marwood, thank you. You know, I was very much a Marwood, where I had this roommate, and if any of my old friends from back in the day are watching this guy named Tyler Rising, who was that very neurotic kind of everything is about me and everything is grand, and you know, and kind of the whole world revolves around. And then, you know, you just get to that point in your life where you're just like, you know, I either have to move on or I'm just gonna be this guy's lackey for forever. Mm-hmm. So. Man, it was even though it was watching these two failed actors be sexually assaulted by a very aggressive uncle that has a very, you know, strong infatuation with baby carrots. It was very interesting to see my life on screen portrayed by these two chaps.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that, and you know the language is so wonderful, and the lines are so quotable. I mean, for me, and I expect for someone like you that has such a love for movies, with subsequent rewatchings, and especially when you get together with other fans of the show, the lines become something like a language unto themselves, right? And I forget often until I do a rewatch that, oh, that's the reason I say that. For example, at one point, Withnail is responding to Danny, some suggestion that Danny makes, and he says, "What absolute toddle." And I say this now, you know, for me, if I want to disagree with something, but also, you know, throw the contempt in there, that's my choice line, right?
Yeah.
And it gets used constantly.
or if I medicate you, it will make a brain tumor feel like a Christmas present or something, right? Oh,
and of course, Withnail responds with balls. Let him get out his drugs. I'll swallow it and run a mile. Not having the shag sack insult me.
And let's just, I mean, let's take that into consideration here, or into context. Richard E. Grant is self-proclaimed allergic to alcohol. Mm-hmm. The man doesn't drink at all. The man doesn't do drugs. He doesn't do any of that. Where Bruce Robinson basically almost forcibly said, you need to get, to term their expression, assholed one night, just to know, just so you have that memory. And he said he did. You know, he pounded a bunch of booze. He got violently ill. But then Bruce Robinson said, like, since then, that's the best drunk person, authentic drunk person on film ever, since or ever will be. And I completely agree.
Yeah, I agree, with a strong runner-up from, what's the Michael Cera movie with Chase the Bunny? Sorry, it's Michael Cera and Kat Dennings. Her best friend in the movie is drunk throughout and, you know, barfing and putting the gum back in her mouth. So she does a pretty close runner-up, but I think that Richard E. Grant still has the best drunk person on screen. And I mean, it's in every scene. It's in every look. It's, you know, you see those sort of head-nodding moments of selfishness shine through. And he also was not a smoker. All the cigarettes he smoked in the movie were clove cigarettes.
Oh, geez, that set must have. That's one thing that I was thinking, because I was thinking back to the time when I lived with 5 other dudes, And we had this like hot tub in our backyard that wasn't a hot tub anymore. It was just a hole, and it was just like a sludge collected in the bottom. And we had a shed in the back with a random rusty engine hoist that I sliced my finger off on. So watching this, all these memories soaked back in, and I knew exactly what their kitchen smelled like. That had Marwood is just so terrified of. It just freaked me out because I'm like, oh God, I've lived in that place and I've smelt those smells and I've seen those things and heard those noises. To kind of review the movie a little bit, it's these two actors. Things are just not turning out well, so they decide to go on a holiday. They decide to one of them knows that he's kind of bamboozling his uncle. A rich uncle, and they get to go to his cottage out in the middle of nowhere. And man, hilarity ensues. It doesn't turn out as it should. And the best thing about this film is that Bruce Robinson was trying to keep his shit during the entire time. The only time he let out, because he didn't want to influence the actors. He didn't want anyone to know what was supposed to be funny, because he made this reference that he's just like, I go to pubs all the time and I hear people kind of dialogue back and forth. He's like, the material is great when it's natural, but if I told them that what they were saying is funny, they would screw it up, or right. Then they would try and it wouldn't be authentic anymore. So he held all the laughs in, and it made everyone very uncomfortable, except, do you know what scene he lost it on?
This one I don't think I recall.
So I guess it was when they're at the pub and Withnail turns around and he does this big shit-eating grin and he has a big chunk of pie in his mouth.
What fucker said that?
Yeah, exactly. And he said that he couldn't even hold it in. He's like, I couldn't have planned it. That was not a stage or anything. Mm-hmm. He just turned around. He had a big fucking piece of pie in his mouth, and he just thought it was the funniest thing ever.
Some of this movie, that scene in particular, had one of those lines that it took me years to decode what the threatening man was saying.
Oh, the Ponce?
No, well, so I did have to look up Ponce, but I figured out pretty quickly that was a derogatory term for a gay man, and what happens is he says, "I'll murder the Persia," or something like that. It's, "I'll murder the pair of you."
Oh, yeah. It's the whole movie's incoherent and belligerent, but also has the best written dialogue than most movies have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gold from start to finish, and sometimes it's introspective, and often it's brash and outwards, and every interaction that they have, that Withnail and Marwood have with other people, is just like it's a new present. It's a new gift of comedy. When they go see Monty, when they're drinking in the bar with the major who's got the military pretensions, and of course when they're in the Penrith tea rooms dealing with Mrs. Brenna Hatchet.
Oh, what does he say to the poacher? He's just like, don't look at me like that. Not slug face, but eel face or something like. Man, it's just, everything is absolute gold, and it's not just laughs. It has at the end, and this is going to be a full spoil. This movie came out in 1987. Suffice it to say that if someone like me that does film podcasts and stuff like that hasn't seen it, so maybe a lot of people haven't, but I will say, quick spoiler alert. Maybe I'll put a time code up if I feel like it. I don't know. But quick spoiler alert. It ends on such a slice of reality, and where only this kind of relationship could end that way, where one does kind of decide to move on and take success by the horns, and the other one is just going to be the guy where. But come to think of it, his father's rich. He has Monty being Withnail. I wouldn't be surprised if they did an after scene and he either became super famous and whatever, or he wound up dead, because those kind of larger than life charismatic people, you never know. But it's always going to end in some kind of grand way.
Right. So when I was younger, I saw the film in a different way than I do now. and I was really, really romantic about using alcohol and drugs. And I thought it was a necessary part of being an artist. I thought that, very Dionysian, destruction-based. I've got Hunter Thompson's Gonzo brand tattooed on my arm. So I originally thought the ending was sad, and that that Marwood was actually sort of betraying that. And so now, 20 years later, 25 years later, after the first time I saw this, I can now appreciate that really the sad person was Withnail, and right down to the last moment, he's seeking to keep Marwood in the sort of codependent, dysfunctional relationship, and there's always time for a drink, and Marwood says no, there isn't, that sort of thing. So it's interesting being able to see it from both sides now.
Yeah, absolutely. Bruce Robinson really is. I mean, he went on to direct a couple studio films that he just did not like. He liked the fact, I mean, if you kind of dig deep into the production of this, you had I think it was called what was it? But it was the production company that would Handmade Films.
Yeah.
And they were responsible for like Life of Brian and some other kind of bad ones, but Dennis O'Brien was the one that kind of oversaw this, and he came the very first day of actual shooting. He didn't like anything that was going on. He didn't like the jokes. He said this is funny in the way that an orphanage is burning down, kind of funny. He wanted everything lit more. He wanted everything more, poppy, more comedic, and Bruce Robinson basically said, I'm not doing this film. I'm going to get on a bus and leave it. Everyone was freaking out, especially Richard E. Grant. Like you said, he didn't do anything except for like small TV parts. This was his big breakout or his big role. This was his shot. So everyone was just like freaking out that it was like screwed since Jump Street. Like on the very first day that production was going to get shut down. Luckily, the studio just said, okay, we're just going to let it happen. We've already gone into production so far. So they completely took their hands off it, to the point where they thought it was going to be a lemon completely. They didn't get involved at all, and they just walked away from it, which allowed Bruce Robinson to make the film that he got to make.
Well, I'm not sure did it even do well in the theater? As I said, it still plays in our rep theater here, maybe once or twice a year. So, and it's certainly much beloved. But
it did not. It's definitely the epitome of a cult film. It cost $1.1 million to make. It grossed $1.5 million in the States. So no, I mean, it really didn't do well. And think about that. England has a way of making really good films on shoestring budgets. Like I mentioned before, Shaun of the Dead was made for, I think, $6.5 million, went on to gross like $60 million on opening weekend. You have Trainspotting that was made for, I think, like $4 something, and it went on to be one of the higher grossing British films. So this one, all the cards, even though it was first, all the cards were stacked up in its favor to do well, and it really didn't.
It's a shame, but I actually kind of like the fact that it's somewhat lesser known, because it's a real treat to introduce people to it, of course, and I knowing that you were going to be watching it just got me all jacked up. I've got to watch it, and I was watching it alone. I didn't really want to get into the drinking, but I was tempted.
Did you ever do the drinking game that's involved with this?
Oh, it's impossible. There's no way.
I mean, you can't drink the lighter fluid, right?
You can't drink that much sherry.
You can't drink any sherry.
I'm not a big fan of sherry, but they clearly are in the movie. I think they drink more sherry than anything else.
Yeah, and that's especially when Richard Griffiths is in this, and he is definitely an unsung hero. He is just so great in everything. Yeah. He's one of those ones that didn't age because he was just always old. Kind of like a William Dafoe. Like you just always remember him, even when he was young, he was old.
He looks exactly the same in the Harry Potter movie.
He really does. He was so good in this during some really uncomfortable scenes where he was just really trying to force his love onto Morwood. Even burglarize, as he states. But yeah, another funny kind of behind the scenes on this that I found. Bruce Robinson went to the premiere, and he was super jacked. He said stomach was in knots about seeing the film for a test audience. Mm-hmm. And he said everyone that walked in was like a younger, kind of a teenage age. And he's just like, oh, okay, this should be funny. It's hopefully, because the whole time, even though that he didn't laugh while making the film, he very much wanted to do it to make people laugh. He knew from the beginning that this was a comedy. That's what it was supposed to be. So he said, well, while he was watching the audience watch his film, no one laughed. There was zero laughter. He said that he was it was one of the worst moments of his life. Come to find out later when they were leaving that it was every single one of them was a German exchange student, and not one of them spoke a lick of English.
That's funny. The last person before you I introduced the movie to was my business partner, Michael, and he's from Belarus, and he just didn't get it at all. He was like, I don't understand what's funny about this. Is it supposed to be just a depressing story? And he saw no humor in any of it. And
wow.
That I told him, you're definitely exceptional, because there's a lot of different kinds of humor in this movie. There's sort of the big obvious stuff, like when they go fishing in the particular way that they go fishing. That's just, I don't know, that's just like physical comedy, really.
Yeah, the cow scene and all that. Yeah.
Run at him shouting.
Another thing, I'm just like, this film made me respect and love and want to look more into Bruce Robinson more than ever, even though that he didn't do like the best film. I think his biggest film after this was like the Rum Diaries with Johnny Depp. But another thing is the entire sequence, not just scene, but the sequence of them leaving the cottage to when they get back to the flat. Everything in between, the driving sequence, the studio wanted it out. They're just like, nope, wow. that we need to cut this out. We need to make it faster. Can you imagine that? Like, he explained the whole like canister thing with the kids pee, like getting kids pee. That the payoff wouldn't have made sense if they didn't include that, and you wouldn't get get in the car, Yeah.
Get in the back of the van.
Yeah, back of the van. So Bruce Robinson, he got a check for $70,000. That was his cut of making the film. So he spent $30,000 to keep that sequence in. He had to pay for that sequence. He loves this film, but he hates everyone he dealt with to make this film.
Right. And going back to your comment about Richard E. Grant's portrayal of drunks, I don't think that there's any better a portrayal of drunkenness anywhere than when he's driving the car and the police have him, just from his, honestly, officer, I've only had a few ales, 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is, right through to them catching him with the bottle in when he's doing the urine test. That is just a towering example of how to act, especially for someone that had only been drunk once in his life.
Yeah, it was. He is something else. And again, I said, I have all the respect for Bruce Robinson, but Jesus, like, he is Richard E. Grant, like, deserves all the praise, because yes, that very scene, when Marwood wakes up while they're driving home, and Withnail's just driving like a Looney Tune. He knows in the back of his head, even when the lights flicker for getting pulled over by the cop, that he's got it taken care of, because it's somewhere off screen he's acquired the children's pee.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I have often wondered where the unadulterated child's piss came from.
Yes.
See, this is the language. You know, you're only in, you know, one watch, so you don't know that you have to call it the unadulterated child's kiss.
Correct. Yes, I'll be more refined, you know, with further review, or more drinks. Right. Then I'll get the lingo just fine.
Exactly.
I'll get the sherry tongue. But yeah, I mean, last thing I want to say, just Ralph Brown. He just. I mean, there wasn't a bad performance, right? There wasn't one person where you're just like, God, you know, Richard E. Grant was great and Paul McGann was great, but no, it's just like the guy on the couch. I'll call him, like I said, Travis McQueen or Gabe. You know who you are, literal guy that lived on my couch. Everyone has had one of these, and if you like film at all, if you like this kind of deadpan British humor, this is the film for you. And I just like, this was Christmas kept going for me because Ted gave me the best present of all, showing me this incredible film. So I just had to say thank you, sir.
Oh, you're welcome. You know, it's on you now to spread it around also. You know, if your sisters haven't seen, definitely, you know, I know they got to get down with it. And it's really, you know, it's a work by itself. You know, there's not much. You're comparing it to other British comedies, and to me, I think it gives people would give someone the wrong idea if you said it was like a Monty Python film.
Oh, sure.
It's not like a Monty Python film. I don't know to what it compares, right?
Yeah, this is about the film that people that watch Monty Python, like aspiring creatives that just haven't figured it out and probably will never figure it out. This is the type of movie. This is the movie about them. This is if you watch the people that watch the movies that wanted to do the thing, but were just too either lazy, high, or drunk to do it. That's Withnail and I in a nutshell.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I've never had a wife or girlfriend that could stay awake through a showing. So I don't know if that's just they get enough of the bad behavior with me, or if it's that it is tuned. So because it is a very you know, it's a film about men by men. A very small handful of women appear in it. Those that do, you know, the ladies in the Penrith tea room did a spectacular job. You know, as the proprietor. Because those were some stuffed shirts, right? Yeah. and you have to think, for those people, even the filming of it must have been an adventure.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah, they didn't look like trained extras. They might have just been there for some tea and some cake. All right. Well, that segues perfectly into my last question for you, sir. Yes, I think that both myself and you would recommend this film. But who would you recommend it for?
Who would I well, I have recommended it sort of full spectrum across the board. It's my favorite movie. So, you know, I carry it with me that way. I often find myself recommending it to people as hey, this is kind of what my life was like for a decade and a half, you know? And I know it doesn't seem like, you know, I'm like this now. I have a day job. I run a company at night. So I'm working 2 full-time jobs. I'm a parent, always busy. So sometimes I have to tell people, you know, if you want to know where, like what young Ted was like and what I sort of lived through, go watch Withnail I. And it'll give you some idea of what life was like for me. And, you know, my guy on the couch, his name was Cam. He graduated off my couch to living in a bar in the basement of a bar in Ottawa.
Perfect.
And eventually graduated all the way up to living with a drug dealer in his very own room. So, you know, you can have hope for the Dannies out there. They can get off the
coast. Rolling those space cruisers, right?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
So, I've recommended it to lots of folks, and I'm always interested in what people think about it. Clearly, some of the magic people that we interact with have, you know, made comments to when I was trying to get you to watch it. I think Abby said that she's clearly a fan, right? And Jason said that he liked the movie. He felt it started slow. To me, it's it hits the ground running. So I don't understand that comment. So
well, there's something to be said about that, because the rest of that story with the whole test audience is the next one. And Bruce Robinson said that was the only, he's fired 2 people in his life, and that was the 2 publicists that brought in that young German exchange student test audience that didn't know what the hell they were watching. But the rest of that story is the next test audience was a group of Americans that he said he was extremely worried about, because America is such a, the US is such a big cinema, eccentric country, right? So he said that the first about 15-20 minutes there was still no laughs, and he was just going nuts, and he's just like, my movie's a failure, I just want to get out of here. And then once so I think there's something to be said, because once, at least for the American audience, once it starts and you kind of, it clicks, you're like, oh, this is supposed to be a comedy, because it plays out like a play, right? It's very much could be adapted to a Broadway thing. You only have really 2 or 3 different locations, and most of them are in little rooms. So you don't know exactly what you should be laughing at until it's just like, okay, these are jokes and we can laugh, and then it hits you with the heart at the end. But still, and then he just, Bruce Robinson said that was the best feeling in the world, because that's what he set out to do, was make a comedy. I think he nailed it, no pun intended. And like I said, I would recommend it to anyone that is in this style of genre. My wife is, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but she likes more like instant gratification kind of movies. This is far too slow for her. I would never, ever recommend this for her.
She'd get put to sleep, just like my wife, and many, many girlfriends have been put to sleep by it. But I think that there's something about the awfulness of their situation, and it does sort of grow on you, right? Like you see at first, and lots of little things happen, like Marwood is having soup when Withnail has none. Turns out it's coffee because they haven't done the washing up, and these things sort of accumulate with you until there's this like maybe a crack in the threshold of all the dread and despair, and it just becomes hilarious, right? And I mean, there's truly ridiculous things, keeping warm by rubbing they call it umbrication, but I assume it's what do you call it? Rub A535, the equivalent of that. And he's rubbing that all over his body, and he's got his rubber gloves on because he's been in the kitchen, and his robe, and he's whacked out of his head on speed, just trying to stay alive until noon so that they can go out to the pub and have a pint of cider, right? So it's
I think it was that breaking point, like you said, for me, was when he just grabbed the lighter fluid, because I had a double, triple take it, and I'm like, because he doesn't say I'm drinking lighter fluid, it's just a little insignia on the bottle, and you're like, holy shit, dude's drinking lighter fluid. I'm in for some shit in this movie. And that's when it was, because I didn't know if it was a comedy or not. I had zero, you didn't tell me, and thank you for that. You didn't spoil anything. So when I sat there, I went in with virgin eyes and ears, and then he picked up that lighter fluid. I'm like, okay, I'm in for a ride here. I hope you all enjoyed it. Ted, Rodney, thank you so much for joining me, sir. Where can people find you?
People can find me as The Real Card Sphere on Twitter, and Facebook, and all kinds of platforms. But John, can I just give you a slip in one more thing about that scene?
Please.
The lighter fluid was not filled with water. The lighter fluid bottle was filled with vinegar. And that was take one, the first take, and Richard E. Grant pushed through it. And if you look, he drinks a good amount of it down. So that's he acted his way through that. That was something that Bruce Robinson did to him. There were a couple of other events through the filming like that, where he wanted things to get, the most natural reactions. So when you go back for your rewatch, check that scene one more time, and just remember he's chugging vinegar at the time.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, with that said, you can you can find me right here on this very channel. They said, we said, thank you so much. We just passed 800 subscribers. So that was a great feat. Thank you so much to all the new viewers. Hope you like what you see. And another way to support all the movie stuff is to go to patreon.com/theysaidwesaid. If you want to help with throwing this stuff up in podcast form, all that, it pays for that, and it also pays to just kind of up the production value of this very show and all the other shows on the channel if you are so inclined to check those out as well. So until next time, I don't have a sign off for this yet, so we'll just say, what's a cool
Chin,
Colt
chin.
thing we could say?
Chin chin.
Chin chin.